Quite a ride. Definitely on my short list of Hitchcock's best. And I'll heap a little more praise on cinematographer Robert Burks. He'd been working at Warner's since he was a teenager and eventually became head of the studio's Special Photographic Services department, where he supervised all sorts of visual tricks involving miniatures, superimpositions, and forced perspectives. As a DP, he delighted Hitchcock with his ability to pull off difficult visual stunts, like a murder reflected in the victim's glasses and the spectacular crash of an out-of-control carousel. Burks worked similar magic for the director on the classics Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, his 1956 version of The Man Who Knew Too Much, Vertigo, North by Northwest, and The Birds. His black and white cinematography for Strangers on a Train garnered the film its only Academy Award nomination, and he'd win an Oscar, Best Color Cinematography, for Hitchcock's 1955 romantic caper To Catch a Thief. Now, Hitchcock was certainly satisfied with Strangers on a Train, but he never got over the disappointment of having to cast Ruth Roman and Farley Granger.
I wanted you to know before. Father wants to see you.
In Roman's case, it's pretty simple. She was not one of the cool patrician blondes the director favored. To Hitchcock, she was too common. As for Granger, the director complained privately that the actor didn't have the virile masculinity that would explain why the effete Mr. Anthony was so obsessed with him. Still, it's pretty amusing to see a Hollywood movie in which a straight actor plays a homosexual and the gay actor plays the straight leading man. Now, back in 2002, I hosted Farley Granger for a weekend festival in Hollywood, celebrating his great roles in film noir. We kicked it off, of course, with Strangers on a Train. We had an onstage conversation after the film, and Farley agreed to take questions from the audience. Now, as we scanned the crowd, I was surprised that no one was raising their hand. It's kind of spooky. Then suddenly, dead center in the middle of the theater, this guy raises his hand and slowly stands up. Now, Farley squinted to get a better look at him, then turned to me with an ashen look on his face, like he'd seen a ghost. And the guy says, "Mr. Granger, I'd like to offer you a little proposal. You might call it a kind of crisscross." Now I'm staring at the guy too, and I'll be damned, he's a dead ringer for Bruno Anthony. And Farley whispered, "Is this real? What the hell is going on?" And I'll admit, our hearts skipped a few beats until we realized, of course, that this was Robert Walker Jr., come to offer tribute to the co-star of his father's most memorable movie. Now, the audience knew he was there, and they got a huge kick out of Farley's stunned reaction. As I mentioned at the top, Strangers on a Train was only the beginning for writer Patricia Highsmith, who'd have numerous stories adapted to film, including such well-regarded thrillers as Purple Noon, The American Friend, and The Talented Mr. Ripley. Now, while the success of Strangers gave a shot in the arm to her literary career, Highsmith's follow-up novel, The Price of Salt, was released under a pseudonym, Claire Morgan. That's because it was the author's thinly fictionalized memoir of a lesbian love affair between a young artist and a married society woman. For many years, no one knew that Highsmith was the author of this story, which was notable in its time for being the only work of lesbian fiction to have a happy ending. In fact, it's the only one of Highsmith's 22 novels that concludes on a relatively optimistic note. In 2015, director Todd Haynes brought the story to the screen as Carol, featuring an Oscar-nominated script by Highsmith's friend and colleague, Phyllis Nagy, and Oscar-nominated performances by Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara, whose character, Therese, was essentially Highsmith's depiction of herself as a young woman. Well, this was our last show during the month of Noirvember, so let's close it out with lots of conversation on the Noir Alley Facebook page and Twitter feed. We'll be back next week with a little-known noir about a shifty cop who falls hard for a gangster's girl. The young woman in question is one of the biggest stars of the 1950s. You want to be here for that, believe me. What did I do with that lighter?